Hello everyone. This is the third in a series of talks about hope, and we've already heard from Nigel about hope for individuals, and last week David talked to us about hope for families. This week we're thinking about hope for our communities. I want to begin by reading some verses from Mark chapter 12. One of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating with Jesus. Noticing that he'd given them a good answer, he asked, "Of all the commandments, which is the most important?" "The most important one," answered Jesus, "is this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this. Love your neighbour as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these." So that's all we have to do. Love God and love our neighbours. Not easy, is it? But it's interesting that Jesus said love our neighbours. He didn't say love our friends. He didn't say love people who are good to us. But he said love our neighbours, those that we're around, those whose street that we live on, those who we work with, those people that we see a lot of time of. Where God has placed us, those are our communities. We're called to love them, whatever we may think of them. Hope comes from God, but it's brought about today through his church. And that's you, and that's me. And it's our hope that we can pass on to our communities. I want to give a couple of examples of how the church has done this over the years. From the earliest days of the church, Christians held what was considered a radical and countercultural view about babies, and were widely known for their care of orphaned and abandoned children. It's quite hard to believe that the practice of abandoning unwanted children was seen as acceptable. But in the eyes of those first Christians, every child was made in the image of God and worthy of love, affection and support. Early Christians gave special attention and care to those who were most vulnerable, knowing them to be, as we read in Psalm 139, fearfully and wonderfully made, creations of the God of the universe. A second example is William Wilberforce and other Christians who worked with others to help fight slavery. Wilberforce spent 20 years of his time in Parliament pursuing the abolition of slavery, speaking against the powerful slave traders and their supporters. It wasn't easy to do and to keep that fight going, but their desire to bring hope to the communities of slaves throughout the world kept them going. I think both these examples show something really important. They show Christians motivated by their understanding of the dignity and importance of all human life, and especially those who have no voice and can't speak for themselves. I think that's a real example for us to consider today. I want to read some other verses of Jesus now. Again, verses that will be quite familiar to some of you. This is from Matthew chapter 5. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Some of you will know I'm part of Life Church in Manchester, and we're in the same family as churches as Bury Christian Fellowship is. We're in the Salt and Light family. So that's literally our name. We are salt and light, but we need to be salt and light to bring hope to our communities. What do these things do? Well, salt is generally quite invisible. Salt brings change quietly. I'm quite a fan of cooking programs, and the current favourite, or the one that's on at the moment, is MasterChef the professionals. Marcus Waring will comment on these things that people have made, and one of his common criticisms is a lack of seasoning. A lack of salt is quite a significant part of that. Now, salt needs to be added at the start of the cooking process to have time to take effect. Putting salt at the end isn't the same. I sometimes do that with food that I think is a little bit tasteless, and you have to put a lot more on, but it's not the same as well seasoned food from the start. It's the same for us. If we're wanting to affect our communities, we need to be involved long term. There's no quick fix. We can't go in and do a commando hit and sort everything out in our communities. I know as a church you're engaged in lots of ways. I was with the Thompsons and the Woodmans last night, and I'm so encouraged to hear the stories of the things that you're involved in. You're punching above your weight in your community, bringing hope to that community. This is the church living it out. This is the church being salt in its community, just as the early church did when it was rescuing those babies. And where they led, society and culture followed. It's now not acceptable for babies to be abandoned. That's the saltiness of the church having been at work over many centuries. But what does light do? Light's very different. Light is visible. Light exposes. It shows things that are wrong. Speaking, perhaps prophetically, to highlight things that were wrong. The first Old Testament prophets, their role was to speak truth to power, to tell kings when they weren't leading the people as they were supposed to be doing. That's never an easy thing to do, to go to someone in power and tell them that they're wrong. But that's what the prophet Nathan did when he went to David to hold him to account for his adultery and for the murder that he'd ordered to be committed. That wouldn't have been a popular thing to do, but that was his role. We need to be those who expose truth and bring light to darkness. That was what Wilberforce was doing in his fight against the slave trade, shining a light into the darkness and misery of that trade, of people being literally sold as chattel. And he didn't rest until there was change. So church, continue doing what you're doing, bringing hope into your communities. Look for those with no voice and speak for them. Speak for them. See those who are oppressed and be moved by God's compassion to go and serve them and to bless them. And always be ready to share with people the true hope of the world, Jesus. Always be gospel sharers. It's the truth of the gospel we need to speak with clarity and conviction, the transforming hope of Jesus. But that hope is now expressed to the world through Jesus' church. That's you and me. God has no plan B for his world. It's the church or nothing. So let's all be hope givers to our community as we live as the people of God, as people who are salt and light in our world that needs us each day. God bless you and have a great week.